Welcome to today's Environmental Professional Networks program. I hope you've enjoyed your breakfast so far. My name's Tim Haab, and I'm the Interim Director of Ohio State School of Environment and Natural Resources. Thanks for being here, and I also want to extend a welcome to those joining us online right now via the EPN YouTube channel. For those watching via YouTube, please see the online program brochure link that Molly Green is dropping into the chat right now. This brochure contains today's agenda and information about each of our speakers, including their professional bios. Here in the room, there's a QR code located at your table that will take you to the same online digital brochure. Take a picture of that QR code to view the brochure. Some paper copies of the program at your tables also, which we encourage you to share. It's an exciting time here at Ohio State's School of Environment and Natural Resources. We have 131 graduate level students and 788 undergraduate students currently pursuing their degree in Environment and Natural Resources. We know today's topic has connected us with students from across Ohio State's campus, including the Department of Human Sciences, which is very exciting. If you're a current Ohio State student, regardless of your major or program affiliation, please give us a wave. Thanks for coming. According to our virtual registration list, we have students joining us on YouTube right now from across America, including at North Carolina State University and Colorado State Universities. Thank you for being here today. The students joining us in the room registered at a highly discounted rate courtesy of the sponsoring partners and with special support from the individuals listed on the back of the program. Please take a minute to review today's organizational sponsors. We organize our programs to be zero waste events, so as you are disposing of your waste materials, please follow the signs in the room and in the hallway area connected to each of the 3 bin types, indicating what materials are trash, recyclable, and compostable. Please note that when you join us for breakfast next month, the EPN team, in partnership with our colleagues at Facilities Operations and Development and our university catering company, will be rolling out a new zero waste strategy to further advance our waste reduction efforts and expand the reach of our composting goals. More on that later in the program. Through its 11-year history, the EPN has hosted over 6,000 unique environmental professionals and more than 80 breakfast programs like the one we're hosting today. During this time, we featured a variety of sustainability and circularity topics related to many different industries. In 2018, we hosted the supply chain lead for the Patagonia apparel company and gained some great insights into how that specific company seeks to reduce its environmental impact in its clothing production and reuse systems. Though that speaker was featured in a panel with several other sustainability professionals from a manufacturing and chemical company and a food security entity, today marks the first time in EPN history taking a holistic and thorough look at the fashion and textile industries from a sustainability lens. The agenda located in your program will give you a sense of the caliber of speakers we convened for this very important topic. Lisa Goldsand and Dr. Tasha Lewis, who many of you here in Central Ohio already know, will provide an overview of today's key themes. Their remarks will be immediately followed by presentations in the order listed in your agenda. I want to give a special thanks to Lisa and Tasha for working with the EPN over the past 8 months to develop and implement this program, and for their mentorship and support of the undergraduate students of SENR. Joe and Kalia have shared with me the joy that they've had in working with both of you to develop this event, and we're grateful for your collaboration in the lead up to today. For those on YouTube, please feel free to utilize the chat function to post your comments, thoughts, and questions throughout this morning's programs. Our team will be reviewing those questions and will also take questions from the in-person audience after 9:15 this morning. Now it's my pleasure to welcome up Lisa Goldsand and Dr. Tasha Lewis.
Welcome. So you made it into the hybrid room today. So why are we all here in this room in Central Ohio? Well, we're here because Columbus is increasingly famous for successfully fostering public and private collaboration not seen in most other cities. We're here because Columbus is the nation's hub of distribution and is its 3rd most important city for fashion. Agriculture, which is so critical to the economy of Ohio, is also critical to sustainable and regenerative clothing production. And we are here because we have a problem which is bigger than all of us. Fashion production, in its current extractive form, makes up 1/12 of total annual greenhouse gas emissions, and much of it quickly becomes waste. Roughly 87% of the materials and fibers used to make clothing will end up in either incineration or landfill, contributing to our carbon footprint. So the bottom line, all indications are that we will not meet our target to stay within nature's boundaries and do our assigned portion to cap global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050. Now, unless a person or an organization is knowingly breaking the law and deliberately doing harm, then we also need to agree that there are no bad actors. The system within which we all operate is complicated and is one which impedes expeditious change without collaboration and disruptive thinking. So I pitched the idea of an EPN event focused on fashion here at The Ohio State University to Professor Campbell a little over a year ago. And to his credit, we don't know if he regrets this or not, he said yes right away. And so as a result of his answer, our collaboration with serious thinkers and problem solvers who you'll hear from today makes me proud, optimistic, and deeply grateful to be in this conversation with you. So the purpose of this morning's session is not to wring our hands, it's not to grandstand about our own degree of accountability or lack thereof for what is happening right here around us or in the manufacturing locations around the world for which we bear responsibility of oversight. No one should be on their knees or on the pulpit this morning. Our purpose is simple: to co-create a renewed vision of circular fashion and to collaborate in this learning together. If you are leaders or people of influence or aspiring university graduates in fashion, then today is about a willing suspension of disbelief. I knowingly and deliberately have quoted Samuel Taylor Coleridge there in the English majors. Willing suspension of disbelief, a pause in your conviction about immovable obstacles for a deep look at solutions from a different vantage point. If you are leaders or people of influence in Ohio or aspiring graduate university students who exist outside of the fashion ecosystem, although I suppose unless you came here naked today, you're kind of in it, then today is about peering into the complexity of the fashion ecosystem and learning. We will look at solutions which sit at each phase of the clothing product life cycle, designing products with end of life in mind from the outset, the status of efforts to valorize what we already have manufactured and imported through innovations in reuse and upcycle, and textiles as a waste stream and the pathway to scaled closed-loop textile recycling. Even if your company's reporting cadence is quarterly, I hope you will leave here thinking about the world, what the world might look like after the implementation of collaborative projects with a 5-year time horizon or a 10-year time horizon. I hope you leave here contemplating fellowship with an expanded circle of thought partners, financial partners, operating partners, and aspiring university graduates who might make the thought of your collaboration in one of these projects less daunting, maybe even alluring. If any city can emerge as a leader in implementing practical, measurable solutions to reduce the impact of fashion production on the environment and on communities, I think it could be this one, Columbus, Ohio. So welcome, and thank you so much for being in this room today.
Okay, all right, we carry on. That's not helpful.
Okay, so who are you, Stephen Bethell? Tell us a little bit about your journey and how did you get here and why did you choose to do what you do?
Yeah. Who are we? I think that's the question that we're all trying to answer, right? As we go through our journey. And I'm not sure that I've quite figured that out yet, but the joy of what I am or what I like to do, how about that, is this idea of finding value where no one else does. You know, from a kid, we used to go to country auctions and they'd have a whole table of stuff and you'd bid on something on an auction, you'd come home with something and shine it and polish it up. Really, it's been a person that has just loved the joy of finding things and seeing value where no one else has. And that's really been, and I've been lucky enough to be able to make a career out of something that I love. This idea of finding and making value out of when other people don't see value at all.
Wow. So Stephen, you've been a champion of reuse for decades now. Tell us about Beyond Retro. What is it?
Yeah, so in short, we've been lucky enough to, 25 years ago, I got introduced to this idea that charities throughout the United States and Canada collect clothes. They sell roughly 25% of what people donate to them, but the other 75%, they're like, what do we do with it? And so we started a company 25 years ago, Bank and Vogue, which is the parent company. And the idea was innovative and relevant solutions to the crisis of stuff. We have all this clothing. What can we do with it? How do we retain its value, or where do we? So the parent company buys from charities all across the United States, from Goodwill, Salvation Armies, you name it. And we find homes for bailed used clothes. And these are either in reused markets in Central America, or they are in resale markets throughout the United States. But one of the markets that we found 20 years ago was in the UK. There's a market for relevant, on-trend clothing, and that's where we started our first store on Cheshire Street in East London. And these, imagine sort of a Costco meets your local vintage store. So these are big footprint stores that emulate the trends of the day, the landscape of the day through use. And our mission with Beyond Retro was, could we actually emulate the trends through secondhand and give people an alternative to be able to perhaps not buy new, but buy secondhand. And that not only are they buying something unique, but they're buying something accessible from a price point that's achievable. And then that journey led us to this idea that the problem with the vintage business is you can only sell what you can find. But going back to this key principle of value retention, we started this idea, could we cut up some of the clothes that are either too big or slightly damaged, and could we remake them into something? So 12, 13 years ago, we set up the world's largest remanufacturing plant where we take used clothes in, we sort them by style or by color or by pattern, and then we cut them up and we make them into new things. And a really good example of that is our partnership with Converse. This shoe came out just last week. And this is made from, so our partnership is that we source and cut out the upper of the Chuck Taylor shoe. So this is actually made from discarded unwearable flannel shirts. And I think what's really important about this, again, this idea of a critical component of the circular economy is value retention. Can we resell it domestically? Could we resell it internationally? And if it can't be resold or repaired, can we make it into something else? So our journey, our 25-year journey, is this journey of value retention, this idea of a restorative economy where we're taking things where people don't see value and then recirculating them into a new system.
So I think that's absolutely amazing. So staying on the subject of upcycle, which I know is what the Beyond Remade is all about, what were the biggest challenges that you faced when scaling to the traditional consumer this concept of upcycle? Like, what advice would you give to traditional retailers that might be thinking along the same lines? What was what was most challenging, or what did you learn?
I think some of the biggest challenges that as used enters into the space of remanufacturing or manufacturing is the just general inertia of, hey, we've always done it this way. Why do we need to do it a new way? The general inertia of, hey, we've made this product the same way for 100 years. And we have manufacturing plants set up for rolled goods. We have testing systems set up for, virgin material. Getting the whole manufacturing process and the team members around this idea it can be really tough because it's extra work, but it's just work. It's just work. And I think that what's interesting is that we're all reading the same newspaper about the Canadian fires, and we're all seeing, the torrential rains. We're all seeing our planet angry at us. And I think the real advice is find those allies within an organization who are willing to be your champion to say, hey, wait a minute, I get that they're presenting a very different way to do something, but the reality is we need to do something different. And we are, as a planet, in an existential place. And I think everybody who sits in a meeting, all the partners around a table, it's finding, my biggest suggestion is to find those champions in the room and get them as excited about, because I think that one could look at the newspaper on a daily basis and become really sad and go, we're pooched. What's the solution here? But to give some tools and a plan about what a restorative economy can look like, an economy that does this value retention, I think is quite exciting.
So I was going to ask you, what change do you most wish to see in the fashion industry in the next 10 or 15 years, beyond what you've shared, the idea of people with influence and decision makers rethinking this linear model and taking on the work to do something different, hard and different. What other change would you like to see in the fashion industry? What are your hopes and dreams for us?
I think that the irony is that as a hobby, I'm a regenerative. I run a regenerative farm, and really, kind of when you peel back the onion on what a regenerative farming is, it's really doing what farmers did like 100 and some odd years ago. And this upcycling, as an example, is really what our great grandparents used to do with their quilting bees around the table. I think that if I had a magic wand, which I don't have, but if I had a magic wand, I would hope that we would be faster at this transition. There are such good, innovative things that are happening at a pace, but I think we need to make it happen faster. That would be that really, how do we upcycle at a greater scale? But also, I think the second magic wand would be, this is not easy to explain to a consumer. Somebody walks into a mall or a shop. How do you take the time to explain the effort and work that goes into something? And then really, how do you actually get people to break that say-do gap? So we refer to this concept of the say-do gap. People say they want to do something green, but they don't do things green. And how do we, as champions of a restorative economy, of value retainers of a circular economy, how do we actually tell this compelling story in a way that's engaging when everybody's assaulted with a million messages right now?
So there are lots of young people with some of the optimism that you referred to earlier entering this space. You're known, of course, as a pioneer in reuse and upcycle. What advice would you give to young people entering the sustainable fashion space as entrepreneurs, as creatives, or as operators?
I think that is, years ago there was a famous Apple commercial. It was one of their first commercials where they had somebody, had a hammer and they swung around in circles and they let it go and it smashed, the existing system. I would say to the young people, the irony is that the next generation of designers, they know all about upcycling. They've been doing it for forever. I think that the key is to have that courage that when you walk into that design room to say, wait a minute, you guys have been getting this wrong for so many years. The path that you are on. So the one sort of word I would use is courage. Don't be afraid to pick up that hammer and throw it through the mirror and suggest that the brands, the processes, the linear system that we're operating in is broken. And have the courage to say, no, we're not doing it that way. Because the way you guys did it, look at the planet you're leaving me.
Stephen Bethell, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Amazing.
That was so inspirational. Thank you all. It's a great pleasure to be here. To be here with the focus being something that we all participate in more than one time a day. If you have multiple jobs, have multiple recreational sports, you take your clothes on and off. How many times a day? And it's part of the social and environmental challenge that as graduates, as professionals, we all are part of. And I would say it is a very slow moving because the book that I show you on the right here came out in 2008. And in 2008, we had to spend about 3 years selling the concept of sustainable fashion to the International Textile and Apparel Association, which is made up of professionals in the industry. And no one really understood it or knew it, and so we had to sell it. It sold, it's now in its 3rd edition, which you see here. And the big challenge for us with the first one was getting people to understand it. With the 3rd book, people are kind of past it. I had said I was never going to do another textbook because they're too expensive. A textbook is an $89 textbook, and why can't it be $24.95? But I did it because the information that we had in our first 2 editions was how to manufacture and produce more circularly. In the 3rd edition, it's not about how to manufacture. It's about everybody in this room to think about what's in your closet. Not about manufacturing more, but all of us engaging in what we already have and not buying more just because, maybe looking at what we have and saying, the button is out. Can I get someone else to sew the button? Or I don't need these pants anymore. They're all ragged on the bottom. Did someone ever tell you could make them into shorts? So it's that kind of mentality, which is where we are. And here we go. So even for someone like myself, when I was a teacher and department chair at San Francisco State for about 23 years, and I didn't believe that when SF Recology, which is our waste collection system in the city, was saying that they were getting textile waste, San Francisco was not collecting and still is not collecting textiles. But people don't know what to do. Many of us feel really good when we collect, and then drop it off at Goodwill or Salvation Army and go, I did good. Well, you didn't do good. Because what you dropped off, what was the value of that? Is it going to be valuable for Goodwill? Could you go back and do something else with it? Okay, so to step back, project. This is where I bring my students. If you want to, we had our hazmat gear on. Ecology said, "Yeah, I'll let you go through two-ton bales, which is about 4,500 garments. We went through in about 8 hours, excuse me. And what we found was, I did not believe that there wouldn't be something good there, that there wouldn't be something that we would recover, and we could go through some wash system that didn't use water and be ecological and bring the clothing back, and maybe we could do, what could we do with that? And you know what? There was all this waste, and it was contaminated. Because when people don't know what to do and they say, but it's only one sock, or it has a rip, or it has a tear, so Goodwill, Salvation Army, other recycle places, they don't want it, so I'm just going to throw it out. And what happens is that when you throw that out, and in San Francisco we have 3 different bins, like a trash, a recycle, and a compost, but our compost bin is blue. And so they're found in the blue bin is where people, because people believe that their clothing is compostable. It's not compostable, it ends up in landfill, it's going to stay in landfill. And the waste comes from the applesauce, the beer can, the vodka can, the tomato sauce, because everything goes together. So after this, San Francisco tried putting things, I said, okay, you found it that way, we'll put things in a bag. We will give bags out to people, they can put it in a bag, tie the bag up, and put it in the blue bin. Have you ever watched waste when you put your stuff out, and the cans get shook, right? That all goes there. And then when they dump the truck off, they have to pat it down. So the bag goes whoop, and you get more contamination. So it doesn't work. Our textiles are very special. Our clothing, our textile products, they're extremely special. They get contaminated, all the denim that was there. And I started to think about collection, identification, and sorting. And from this study, we found nothing that was good, nothing that was reusable. So then, this is a study that's just completing now. Goodwill Bay Area opened their doors to a project with the Office of the Environment, San Francisco, and said, okay, we will let you look at what we get and see, since it was a funded project through the Office of the Environment, to see what we get that it's damaged in some way. So we can't sell it because we don't want to sell anything that's damaged or dirty. And what they did is, they allowed myself and another person to go into their facility. Again, we spent about 8 hours and went through about two-ton bales of clothing. But what it is at Goodwill Bay Area, everything that anybody collects goes down I don't know what happens out in this area, but everything goes down what do you call those moving? Thank you, a conveyor belt. And so someone's saying good, bad, value, no value. And so the things that have the highest value for the customers that are a Goodwill customer, which is probably many of the trendsetters that are in the room here, it's a $40 or up value, and it's going to be selling on eBay. So this is where Goodwill is selling these. So, okay, so that goes into that. And those were the ones that we were going to look at that had the highest value. So they get, okay, this is the high value. And then there's another conveyor belt of people that say, oh, but this has a hole, this has a stain, this has a rip. And those were the ones that we were looking at. So they'd already been sorted through twice. And what you need to do is have that, it's not quite a design eye, but it's the eye that knows how things are put together. So if there's a tear on a seam, you can say, oh, that's an easy repair. If there's a tear or a stain down the middle, well, what are we going to do with that? Well, we could put a pocket there. We could do something else with that. So that is not something that Goodwill people were trained to do. So they brought this in. We had money. We sent either out to repair, to local manufacturer. And by repair, I mean something that's repairable is a zipper that's broken, a button that needs a new button sewn on, a hem. It's nothing that's any kind of what I'm calling a redesign. So that's different. When something is redesigned, you're taking it apart and you could make that skirt into a stuffed animal. Something as extreme as that, so that you can use the fiber another way. Okay, so we did this, and the average cost for every garment that we did give back to them sold for $40 or more. But the average cost was about $45. And we say $45 to repair a garment. Well, in the garment industry, you make money by the fact that it could be a circular manufacturing process where I'm doing the sleeve and the next person I'm putting in the sleeve and the next person is doing the hem, and everybody's trained in their job, but it's repeat. You know, you're making thousands of these, so that's where your cost per item goes down. When you're redesigning something, you don't know what you're going to do because every garment is special and every garment is different. And then what Goodwill found was that when you take that jacket, and so what you're seeing here is you're seeing the person, she's a sustainable, the person who's doing the ironing, she has her shop in the city, there's the repair. Goodwill came out with a special tag for these that said mended with care. Because labeling, if you take a garment that's, give me a name of a manufacturer that you buy at Goodwill. Anybody? Thread? Express. So you take an Express garment that came with long sleeves and it was a dress, and you make that, you take the sleeves off and you make it into a top and you sell it at Goodwill. Who's responsible when there's a damage to that? Is it Goodwill or is it Express? So what Goodwill, I mean, whose liability issues are major in this redesign and resale industry? And so what they did is they put this mended with care on, and then you see that what the person from Goodwill is doing right there at the bottom is she's putting them into a bag for sale. But to engage all of you in this room, to engage the customer, the final customer, in the redesign is what needs to happen. Because if I don't do that, then A, it was a size 12, but by the time I redesign it, you know what happens to clothing? It doesn't get bigger, it gets smaller. So as you start hacking at it, that's what happens. Or if you are making it bigger because it was a little small and you're adding other fabric in the back, what does that size mean that said it was a 12 and now it's a 16? So all of these are issues that keep it in your closet longer. You're the wearer. Or bring it to someone to repair it or to redo it. And think about all your environmental consequences with what you do. So I go back to the concept of how we're going to sort. How do we decide? And collection, identification, and sorting. So it's now waste to recovery, which is where I think we all are, and all you environmental scientists and garment people that are in the room right now. Waste to recovery is also what will be speaking about later, which is extended producer responsibility. And what you have here is, has anybody ever heard of Sortal? Yeah. So what we are needing now is Sortal has a partnership with the UN on the UN initiatives. Can I get to it? I might be able to. It's a device where you put your merchandise over it and it says that it's 100% cotton or it's 60 cotton and 40 poly. So what we need, and this is Sortal, and you know you're in sustainable goals of the UN. So what we need to do is understand what the fiber is. And the number one thing that most people do is they cut out their fiber content labels. So that's why it's the producer that knows what the fiber is. We don't know because we cut them off. We don't remember. So the producer is whose I feel is responsible. And we need to do work with who we're buying from and know more about our garments and other textile products. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carmen Gama. I'm the Director of Circular Design at Eileen Fisher. I've been at the company for 8 years, and my job here is to figure out what to do with all of the damaged inventory that comes back through our take-back program. I oversee all of the collections, all of the solutions, and I manage a team that we are really dedicated to address this huge volume that comes every year. Green Eileen was created in 2009 by the Eileen Fisher Foundation. The main purpose was to collect unwanted Eileen Fisher employees' garments and sell them at our lab store to create funds that will support the Eileen Fisher Foundation's Women and Children's program. But through the success of these, we were selling these garments at our lab store. Our customer really loved these vintage pieces or these resellable garments that we were doing. So we decided in 2013 to open our take-back program to all of our customers. So at that time, we were called Green Eileen. But when it passed to Eileen Fisher Inc., we changed our name, or we rebranded to Eileen Fisher Renew. So since 2009, we've collected over 2 million garments through our take-back program. And, you know, this is what we've been doing ever since. So how Eileen Fisher Renew works is our take-back program buys back all of the garments from the customers that they no longer want. We give them a $5 coupon regardless of the condition, regardless of the style. It literally can be like a one sock that is like completely eaten by moths, you know, completely destroyed. Or we can buy back like a brand new cashmere sweater. We don't ask any questions to our customers. The customers can return any of their unwanted garments to any Eileen Fisher store or send it directly to our 2 warehouses. When they come to the store, they tell the store associates, you know, I have 10 items in this bag. The store associates just hand them out like a coupon, a $5 coupon per item. So what that happens after is that the stores send those garments to our warehouse in New York, which I said previously, we have 2 warehouses, one in New York and one in Seattle. But all of those garments come to our warehouse in New York where they get sorted and processed. This is where the garments get labeled if they're sellable or not sellable. We currently correct around 20,000 garments per month. 2/3 of those garments are sellable and 1/3 of those garments are damaged. Our process of sorting the sellable and the non-sellable, it's kind of like different. For the sellable, our garments are sorted into seasons, so if like spring or summer or fall, and they're sorted by categories. So for example, pants, tops, skirts, and then everything gets separated to be locally washed as we need it. For the damaged inventory, we have a different sortation process. We sort it around the 3 main solutions that we have. The biggest solution that we have is fiber to fiber recycling, which means we shred to a fiber level and we turn it into a new yarn, either for the industry or to use back into Eileen Fisher. The second solution is what we call the special collections. This is what we do, like our Waste No More program, which is creating felted goods to make artwork, home goods, or accessories. The other special collections that we do is like mended, we do natural dye, and we also do our recent collections, which is remanufacturing, right? The whole team between Renew and Waste No More, we're around 18 people. This includes the stores associates and the temps that we have. I believe that my greatest achievement here at Eileen Fisher is that I've been able to scale the operations and establish operations to really address all of the damage inventory that comes through our doors. We receive around 90 to 100,000 garments per year of damage inventory. So what I'm currently working that I feel very proud that is, it's like a cross-functional team that we came together, is really establishing and scaling the fiber to fiber recycling processes. We have 100% wool, 100% linen, 100% cotton, and 100% silk. Each one of those fibers are distributed internationally to be turned into new yarns. So we're currently working with partners all over to really streamline these operations so we can also share to the industry so they can mimic and really start we all collectively start funneling and collecting garments so we can put them back into the system. When we're sorting the damaged garments, we collect a lot of valuable data that probably brands will pay a lot of money for it. As we're touching these garments, we are seeing how there's either an end solution for them or there's no solution for them, right? We see design flaws. We get a lot of material information. So for example, sometimes we see production issues when we're sorting these garments. Because Eileen Fisher has been producing the same styles or the same materials for over 40 years, because next year we're turning 40, we see a lot of repetitions of error. So this is information that we're able to give back to the designers, right? So for example, sometimes we see that the leather pants, they're coming all ripped at the waistband. And we don't see only one. If we see it in multiples, and this is feedback that we're able and data that we're able to gather and bring back to the design team. But I think the most valuable information is that as we're thinking about our circular strategy, right, as you're designing for first life, you really need to start thinking about the second, third, and fourth life, if you want, for that garment. So the designers are not able to think about the second and third life without really having the feedback of what can those garments churn in the second or third life. So for example, we have a lot of blends in Eileen Fisher, right? We have viscose, nylon, and spandex. It's one of our bread and butter fabrics. Well, at the end of wear, when the customer no longer wants it and when they no longer can wear it because it's damaged, there's not much that I can do with these garments. So what I have to do is downcycle, right? So downcycling is not bad, it's better than the landfill. Downcycling means that we're shredding to shoddy for the automobile or the built industry. But these are high quality materials. I don't want them to become shoddy. So this is information I'm bringing back to the designers that hey, there's nothing I can do with this garment, but just turn it into shoddy. That's one example. So then they're able to modify potentially that fabric in the future so I don't turn it into shoddy. The other example that it's this is really great, is that, when you start designing for first life and thinking about high quality, sustainable materials, designers might be choosing a blended material with cotton and tencel or cotton and hemp. But yes, that's a great intention. But at the end of life of that t-shirt that has cotton hemp or cotton tencel, there's nothing I can do right now. So again, this is feedback that I'm bringing back to the designers. The intention is good on the first life. There's no solution to the afterlife. So I always say, thinking about the afterlife first and then designing is the most valuable thing that you can do for a garment to have the possibility to be put back into the system. So this is what we do with the data by sorting damage inventory. The value of having a take-back program for Eileen Fisher is that we want to offer our customers the opportunity for them to have sustainable solutions for the garments that they no longer want, right? We wanted to be offered a process, an easy process for them to return their garments back, get something in exchange, and we will be responsible for doing that, right? The value is that we are closing our own circle. It's not fully closed yet, But by us collecting our garments, sorting our fibers into different materials and putting them back into the system, we're able to avoid utilizing natural resources to create new garments. For us, for Eileen Fisher, our Take Back program is pretty successful. It works for a business model. It works because we have high quality materials with simple designs, and we've been doing a lot of these designs for years. But this model does not work for every brand that it's out there, right? I just keep saying, like, take back programs, not every company should have them, right? It really depends on the product that the company has to be able to assess if a take back program is better or not. So for example, if you're a fast fashion company, right, and you have a take back program, well, you might have a take back program, but the solutions might be completely different than what we are doing at Eileen Fisher, right? Because they have lower quality materials, they have a lot of not the same styles. So maybe recycling is a solution for them, right? So take back programs are not for everybody. And also take back programs, we do it in-house, but that does not mean that every brand should do it in-house. Right now, we live in a world that for the past 5 years, there was a huge increase on third-party companies that offer front and back-end processes so that companies don't have to do it on their own. I just keep saying this example, but long time ago, companies own their own productions, right? Now companies outsource their productions somewhere else. So the same is going to happen in the future. Yes, we at Eileen Fisher are doing it in-house, but in the future, companies should be outsourcing these operations so they just own the IP, but not the whole process.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Luke Henning, and I'm the Chief Business Officer for Circ. At Circ, we're on a mission to protect the planet from the cost of clothing. And what do we mean by that? What is that cost? Well, when we look at fashion and we look at the resources that we use, it's pretty plain to see. The predominant fiber that we use for textile manufacturing is polyester. In fact, we use 2.5 times more plastic for polyester fiber than we do for water bottles in that whole packaging industry. And it's the same molecule we're talking about. If we go to the second biggest fiber, you get to cotton. And cotton has some lovely properties, but there is challenges with cotton in terms of it's a thirsty crop. And there's only so much land that you can grow it on. Land that you also need to think about using for food. But because you need those lovely properties that a natural fiber has, people have turned to other ways to make fiber. So your next biggest area is the man-made cellulosic fibers. And for that, we currently cut down at least 200 million trees a year to fulfill our desire and demand for viscose, for rayon, for lyocell. When you combine all of this resource usage with the fact that we only wear our clothes an average of 7 times, that's 7 wears, you get to a hugely polluting industry. And that's why the UN estimates that 10% of greenhouse gas emissions are attributable to the textile industry. Now, let's take a look at the US. Current recycling solutions are not solutions. Officially, 6% of material within the US is recycled. What do they mean by recycling? Well, normally it means that it's being processed, chopped up, shredded, and turned into things like dog bedding, into moving blankets, into shoddy fiber, acoustic paneling, stuff in car seats. That's about 13 million tons that's sent directly to incineration or landfill each year. And why is it going to landfill? It's because a lot of it is blended. And as soon as it's blended, it's no longer recyclable. This is where we come in. And we've patented a solution where we can take polycotton. What do we do here? We take the polycotton, we dissolve out the polyester, breaking it down to its basic chemicals. And then those chemicals are separated from the dyes, the finishing chemistry, and purified and can be made back into polyester. With the cellulose in the cotton, we take the cotton, which is a very pure form of cellulose, and we use that cellulose to replace trees in making your man-made cellulosic fibers. So we take that waste cotton that we recover from the polycotton, we process it to make into lyocell or into viscose. Our current focus, though, is on lyocell. So we take both fractions from the polycotton, polyester, and the cotton fraction, and are able to make something that's viable as a textile fiber from that. Now, better than having a solution is having a solution at the right time. And I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with what's happening in the market. There are a lot of bans coming on landfilling or incineration of textiles. In fact, the EU is making the collection of household textiles mandatory from 2025. You've got California, which is the 5th largest economy on a standalone basis, requiring that you need 50% recycled content in all bottles, for example, by 2030. And these recycled mandates are driving up the demand for these fibers. You've got a lot of companies, countries even, declaring carbon neutrality goals, net zero. And then you have consumers who are starting to demand sustainability more and more. And so you get the fashion brands making these commitments. And I could have put up a list here as long as my arm. But generally, when they talk recycling, what are they talking? They're talking about taking plastic bottles and recycling those into textiles. The problem is that's not an ideal solution, because that is life extension, definitely. But you go from bottle to textiles to landfill or incineration. And if you remember from the beginning, you use way more polyester for textiles as you do for bottles. So there would be no way to ultimately plug the gap. And so this is creating serious pressure on the market. And what's more is the bottling companies, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Danone, Unilever, all of these companies need their bottles back. And so there's a fight brewing in the industry over who gets those bottles and what they get recycled into. Luckily for us, with our solution, we're not doing it alone. We've got a very strong series of partners. We're backed by Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which is probably the leading climate tech investor for hard tech companies in the world. We've got Inditex, which is the parent of Zara, Bershka, Pull&Bear, on board as an investor. Zalando, the largest clothing online retailer in the US. Temasek, major investor. 1890s is all about decarbonization of technology. We've got industrial companies like Avery Dennison, Marubeni, Young One. So we've got a very strong team of supporters who are helping us roll the solution out to the market. Talking of rolling it out to the market, in April at the Milan Design Week, we launched the first ever collection of garments where both the polyester and the cotton fractions from a polyester garment were recycled and made into new garments. So these garments shown here were made with Circ polyester recovered from textiles, Circ lyocell recovered from textiles. And what was really impressive about this was that the brand, in this case, was willing to show really strong support for this launch, even to the extent of sewing our name into their label. I'm also proud to report that, we hold ourselves to a very high standard. And so we have gone through a very extensive process to become B Corp certified. I wouldn't be surprised if a few of you out there have gone through this process and understand that it's pretty arduous, especially since it can't fit every single company. And so you have to do a lot of work to match what they are driving for. Why do we do this? Why are we pushing to clean up fashion and turn it circular? Because we ultimately believe that you can wear the same molecules for life. We have all the clothes we need to make all the clothes we'll ever need. And so if we can just recirculate the molecules that are out there, we can definitely convert the linear supply chain of fashion to a circular one. Thank you very much for your time. I'll be taking questions and sharing more on the panel.
Hi, everyone.
Can you hear me? All right. Well, thank you to our panelists. Those are some great presentations. Can you hear me? Okay, great. All right. So we'll start with some questions moderated by Lisa and I, and then we'll open it up for Q&A from the audience. So do you want to start off, Lisa, or you want me to start off with a question?
You start,
okay.
Professor.
So we'll start off with a question for everyone in the Zoom, and we'll start off with you, Connie, here in person. But I know each company talked a lot about what they're doing, and I wanted to loop in a conversation about the consumer. What do you wish consumers knew today that may not be a part of their mainstream information about circularity? Is there something that you think consumers don't know yet, or you wish they knew more about?
Is mine on? Can you hear me? Yeah. If you've heard that old expression about the chicken or the egg, what came first? Are manufacturers making for us, or are we making the manufacturers, telling them what we want? And I would say to everybody in the room, there's enough easy information at our fingertips. Don't buy it if you don't know what Eileen Fisher just told you, that wonderful information about what they do with it. If you wonder what's going on, ask a question. Do the research before you make the next purchase. There's information out there.
So from our Zoom, Carmen, since we just referenced your point there, what do you wish consumers knew about circularity that may not be so mainstream right now?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. I can barely hear the questions or the conversations, but I think if I understood correctly, is that you're asking, what do we wish the consumers knew more about circularity? Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yes. I mean, not so much in circularity, but I wish consumers were more aware of the true cost of making garments, right? I think customers are blindfolded by what it truly costs to make a t-shirt, both financially and environmentally, right? Because when you pay $5 for a t-shirt, you are not paying the real price of that, right? Somebody else is paying for that with their labor, with their time. We're paying through, all of the things that are happening around us. So I wish companies were more transparent and were more truthful in showing what the real cost is. And then once customers know these, they might be more, they might think twice before buying something, at a real cost, because it might be something that they cannot afford anymore. Maybe they can afford it now, like just one every couple months instead of like buying a t-shirt every month, right? So I think true cost is very important.
Thank you. Stephen, do you have a response to what you think consumers should know that you maybe think they don't know right now?
Hey, good morning. Good morning. I think, I liked what Carmen said, that I think that the consumers aren't aware of the energy and effort. I don't know, this summer I grew a garden, and I was all excited because I just pulled my carrots and they were like this long. But you realize the effort and energy to grow your carrots. It's considered. And I think that the challenge is in modernity is we have the luxury of things being at hand, really easy. And I guess just to build on what Carmen was saying, I not only would wish that people understood the energy and effort that went into building something, but also the ability and the importance of building things out of non-virgin material. So how do we actually inform the consumer about the carbon conversation? That if you can build something out of an existing material, that's your quickest path to a low carbon production. And as we're all kind of trying to figure out, what does a low carbon economy look like? What does a circular economy look like? What's an economy with using existing materials? I think informing, if I had a magic wand, that would be a repurposed magic wand. My dream would be that the consumer would understand the carbon impact of everything that they buy and everything that they do, because our biggest existential threat, global warming, and really about this carbon conversation is how do we challenge each of us to change our buying habits so that we're viewing the world like the Matrix in a whole new way. So my magic wand would be, how do we inform the consumer about the carbon impact of their purchases, and can their purchases either be reused or remanufactured?
And Luke, can you chime in and share what you think consumers should know? You shared a lot of data with us today.
So I kind of have to ask the question, if you don't know, why do you not know? Because the information is out there. So there's an element, in my view, there are two things here. One is the information is not broadly disseminated in mainstream channels in a lot of ways, but also people don't want to know. It's much easier to buy a $5 t-shirt and you'd be like, wow, I saved so much money on this t-shirt, than to think about, the slave wages that went into that $5 t-shirt. It's much more comfortable for us to not have to think actively about these things, because if you look too deep into these things, you have to react to them. The thing that I would want customers to know is that we're turning around a battleship here. It's not, we need to turn and create solutions and bend the arc of industry that's been built over hundreds of years. So that's going to take some time. And in the meantime, what customers can do and consumers can do to influence this fight against this existential threat is they can actually choose to just buy less, look after their clothes. One of the best things you can do is just keep your clothes as clothes for as long as humanly possible. We have, in the last only 30 years, really fundamentally changed how we view clothing, from being a durable good to being a semi-durable good to being a disposable good. So we need to somewhat reverse that if we're going to bend the arc back.
Okay. I'm a little distracted just because I'm so relieved to know that Stephen would buy a pre-owned magic wand instead of buying new. So got a little distracted there. So my question for the panel is related to thoughts about how brands could reevaluate their priorities. So my question first goes to Luke. So you and I have talked quite a bit about the journey of feedstock being post-industrial versus post-consumer, and sort of what the time horizon is for what we think we would like to have happen, which is that our clothing actually gets recycled and made into more clothing. Can you talk a little bit about that, feedstock in general, and also what do you think apparel brands should consider over the next 10 years to make it easier for post-consumer textile waste to begin to be recycled at scale?
So let me start with the first thing here, and that is this idea of everyone talks a good game about wanting to recycle post-consumer textiles. Post-consumer textiles are the most tricky stream to recycle. It's just if you recycle anything, you never want to start with the most contaminated or complex stream. And post-consumer, you're getting a mixed bag of stuff. A lot of the sorting, grading doesn't really exist to the extent that it can meet the requirements of a lot of the recyclers now. Also, if you're trying to finance a large facility, anyone who wants to back you financially wants the lowest risk possible. So they want you to find the lowest risk feedstock that you can possibly find for your facility. And that's post-industrial. Because post-industrial feedstock, you don't realize how much cutting room, waste and scrap there is in the supply chain. Or even at yarn stage, at fiber stage, at dyeing stage, and at the cut make sew, all of these areas you've got waste. And it's a lot cleaner waste. You have a lot more information about what it is. So considering you're dealing with mountains of waste right there, why don't you deal with the easiest waste to deal with in the beginning? And that's what all industries started with. You didn't start with the most difficult to recycle. You start with the easiest to recycle and build from there. Same thing with, why are we worried about 100% recycled content to start? If it's going to slow down adoption or slow down the ability to scale, let's focus on volume of waste diverted over percentages. Because ultimately it's the volume of waste that we want to divert that's the critical and key thing. So that's the first thing I would start with. What can brands do here? Well, brands have pushed, this question of cost over everything for most brands has changed the choices of what kind of fibers we use, what kind of dyes, finishing chemistries, everything that we use. So if we can start designing things that are more recyclable, then the post-consumer stream will become more recyclable. The other thing brands can do is fundamentally, they capture most of the margin in the textile supply chain. So out of that comes a responsibility to both fund some of these end-of-life solutions, take responsibility for the stuff that's being generated, but also invest in solutions and not paltry sums that represent 0.00001% of their profits, but invest meaningful numbers in transitioning this industry.
Does anyone else from the panel want to weigh in on any of that?
If you think about recycling clothing, often we think about, well, you take the clothing and you recycle it, and it gets broken down. And it's not until you see that you have to take off all the metal. If there's a lining that's a different fiber, you can't just think about taking your garment and recycling it. So one of the things that, for example, Levi's in San Francisco is with their denim, what they're known for is the rivets. Rivets, there we go. Rivets in our denim jeans, and that's what Levi's, that's their brand mark. Well, have you ever tried to take a rivet out of your jeans? It's impossible. Well, if you're going to recycle that, you have to take all the metal off. So that's why it comes back to the designer and designing into a garment that can be thinking of, as someone said, the afterlife rather than the before life.
Any questions from the audience? I know there's some great engagement happening on YouTube right now, back and forth, but no questions for the panel. Any in here? Yeah, please.
I don't know if you can hear me. In everyone's presentation, we talk about sending clothing somewhere. We're sending it to the UK. We're sending it to South America. Am I close enough? Oh, sorry. Yes. We're sending it to the UK. We're sending it to South America. You're sending it to your New York hub. Are we considering the impact of that, the cost, carbon footprint, whatnot, of sending things other places? Since there is clothing everywhere, is there a possibility of doing this on a smaller, more local scale?
Mind repeat the question? That broke up really badly and we couldn't hear it.
Tasha, maybe if you can say it so we can hear
Sure.
it.
So if you can hear me, the question was about moving clothing, the distribution of secondhand clothing, and we're moving it around and shipping it to different places. thinking about the carbon footprint of just distributing secondhand waste, post-consumer textile waste to other places for processing. Has anyone thought about looking at a more local solution?
So I'll jump on this one first because I'm probably the largest culprit of sending stuff around the world. So I think that there's a couple of things that are really important in this conversation. First, absolutely, garments need to live in a domestic ecosystem or a local ecosystem and get its maximum use. But the reality is, since this conversation about reality, the reality is that at a typical thrift store in the US, they have about a 25% sell-through. So 75% of what is donated to a charity isn't resold. The other challenge about and going to Luke's point, and Luke's very right, being the post-consumer person, the used clothing person, and we're not going to call it waste. We're going to take that word out. This is an input rather than a waste. The reality very quickly about the post-consumer space is that we live in a world of fractions and fractions and fractions. And I'll give you my favorite item as an example: cashmere sweaters. I love cashmere. Like, inappropriately, I have a fascination with cashmere. But if you wanted to set up a cashmere recycling facility, what you need to do is cashmere represents 1% of sweaters. Sweaters represent, let's say, 7% of overall. So it's 1% of 7% of the whole is cashmere. You need material to come to world hubs to be able to create the opportunity for recycling at scale. So, and the cost, the carbon calculation cost, and I'm happy you can reach out to me on LinkedIn afterwards. We've done carbon calculations based on, and remember, we put everything in shipping containers, which is a lot better than trucks. The carbon calculation versus moving material around so it can be sorted and reused in various hubs around the world is a lot better than using virgin material. So the answer to the question is, yes, domestic is important, local is important for reuse, but we live in an international supply chain, and for those to work successfully, we need material to come to one or two places to be able to create opportunities for recycling. I hope that.
Oh, sorry. I was going to tie back on that because we literally just sent 2 containers of wool to Italy from our warehouse in New Jersey, right? Because we, as Eileen Fisher, that we collect our garments, we want to keep it as local as we want, but like United States is not there caught up with these technologies. Europe has been doing recycling wool for over 100 years. So yes, at least for now, because I get asked this question a lot, I'm not thinking about the carbon footprint of transporting these garments. Right now, I'm helping build these systems, like streamline them. And then we can start thinking about like the impact. But to Stephen's point, to make a garment from scratch, rather than take these garments where they need to go, it's better for our planet. Sorry, Luke, I totally cut you off.
No, I just want to reiterate several things across there because I completely agree. One, shaving off the logistics around secondhand goods is efficiency improvements that come later once the systems are actually in place. Let's actually transform the system and figure out how to do that as efficiently as possible. Then we can worry about shaving it, making it more local, all of these things. It's a noble ambition, but it's the 3 to 5% efficiency improvement versus the 80%. Let's deal with the 80% issue first, which is actually getting the recycling technology up and scaled and everything and in place first and foremost. And I mean, recycling is just one component. So, I completely agree with a lot of what Stephen is saying as well about it needs to be consolidated, because if there isn't consolidated enough feedstock, there's no way you can actually build a facility to actually process that. Because what most people don't realize is to make these things work, you have economies of scale. So you're building very large facilities. These are not small micro recycling facilities. They just the economics do not work. And so if the economics don't work, no one will buy the recycled material. Even if it's better than virgin, no one will buy it because it will be too expensive. The other thing that I want to just share is that Stephen touched on this, but it's often much more environmentally friendly to ship containers on freight around the world than it is to move things by truck. Moving something from Florida to Seattle by truck or even by rail is often has a much higher carbon footprint than, you know, sending that same material from Bangladesh to, you know, Florida by freight. Just because of the sheer volumes you can move and the carbon footprint of a loaded mile for sea freight versus truck.
I think it was a great question, and I want to take it another way. We don't know the carbon footprint of our clothing in general. Even when you look at your garment, the Federal Trade Commission tells us what needs to be on our labels, and it may say made in the United States, made in Bangladesh. What was made there? The last operation of the garment. You don't know where the fiber was grown or manufactured. You don't know where it was turned into yarn. You don't know where the yarn was turned into a fabric. You don't know where the fabric was cut, where the garment was put together. None of that has been information that we know. And because we're thinking of it as the second life, the third life, let's think of the first life and ask manufacturers to tell us about what the carbon footprint is of what we're buying or renting.
We'll take our final question from the YouTube audience. Amina Shazad asks, how can we educate consumers about sustainability?
Has anyone watched Amy Pony's Fashion Reimagined? It just got released in the US. It's a made for consumers documentary. And it's actually, you know, because it's made for consumers, it's pretty entertaining, but it hits all of the points. The other thing I would say is it's getting out there. I was watching my 9-year-old, I was watching the Babysitters Club on Netflix, and I overheard them having a discussion, and there was one of the kids saying, oh, I'm trying to remember how it was phrased. My friend Amy's really into sustainable fashion, and so she buys secondhand garments or something. And I was like, they literally are using the word sustainable fashion in a kids show on Netflix. It's starting to actually get out there. So I would say the message is starting to bleed into the common lexicon when it's starting to show up in places like that. But I would say, you know, that Fashion Reimagined is a great documentary to recommend to people. Unfortunately, you've got to pay to view it in the US.
Hey, can I be? I'm Canadian, so you know this is going to be a Canadian perspective. I actually don't think this focus. I think the question is a smart one, but really the question should be, how do we get government to start to regulate and mandate things like carbon accounting or mandate recycled content? You know, how do we, we know that things like smoking are bad for us and governments tax it or they, put warning labels on. And, if somebody buys something from a Shein, should they not be told about it? And I am of the belief, being the Canadian that I am, where government takes a bigger place in society. I think the real question is, how do we get our governments to start mandating recycled content? Because the reality is the Lukes of the world are doing an amazing job being able to make material from recycled content, whether it's pre-consumer or post-consumer. But if we don't have a customer, a legislated customer, the brands will never pay. And so my twist on the conversation is, I think it's not only the consumer that we should be speaking to, but how do we push the legislators to change the rules? And maybe it's positive taxation. If your garment comes to the US and it has 25% recycled content, you pay a lower duty, or, but I think that really, my frustration with it is, we have the ability today to be able to supply post-consumer cotton at scale that could be put into fiber. The challenge, however, is that the brands won't pay the green premium. And the only way which we're going to get them to pay the green premium is to legislate them to do it. So anyway, so I'm sorry I twisted the answer, but there you go.
Okay, unfortunately, we're out of time. But I want to thank everybody, Stephen, Connie, Carmen, and Luke, for your remarks, and Lisa and Tasha for your moderation today. Absolutely fascinating discussion, and gives us a lot to think about from a lot of different perspectives. And just picking up on that last question that was asked about what we can do as far as education, and twisting it around a little bit selfishly because we're here at a university, it does kind of remind me of some of the work that we've done over the past couple of decades, and really the last decade in particular at the university, in trying to build interdisciplinary programs that focus on a lot of these different issues, because this is an issue that's not going to be solved by one particular set of education. We have to think about the business models. We have to think about the supply chain. We have to think about individual decision making. We have to think about resource use. We have to think about all of these different pieces of what goes into running a very complex business that's trying to solve a very complex problem that we're all involved in. And so in sort of a shameless way, I'm looking over here at Jeff, former director of the School of Environment and Natural Resources. Little over a decade ago, we were able to champion a new major that was joint between the Department of Agricultural, Environmental, and Development Economics and the School of Environment and Natural Resources that's focused on environment, economy, development, and sustainability. And the idea there was to try to educate students in solving these types of issues that are system-wide. They're not just isolated problems that we can solve with one particular solution. So thinking about this from a system perspective and thinking about the complex set of issues, whether it's technology, whether it's recycling, whether it's reuse, these are complicated problems, and we need to educate the next generation to be able to solve these problems as well. So I'm not going to, I could stand up here and ramble forever on this because it's just absolutely fascinating to me, and being an economist and hearing the economic issues just really is fascinating to me. But I'm going to cut it off there, and as is our EPN tradition, we want to recognize each of you with a certificate of appreciation. Joe is going to help with those here in the room. Steve, Luke, and Carmen, we'll send you your certificate in a digital fashion later today. We ask that you please stay on the video if you're able to, because we're going to try to do a group photo here in just a couple of minutes. And we'll have you on the screen for that. These certificates are to acknowledge your work to help us learn and shape the world for the better. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
That concludes today's program. Please turn to the back of your brochure for details of our next breakfast event. On Tuesday, November 14th, the EPM will return to this venue to host Plastics, We Got Your Number, New Circular Economy Approaches Unveiling Potential to Make a Difference. This event marks part 2 of our autumn series on regional circular economy strategies. You'll join with waste management leaders and experts from Rumpke, Advanced Drainage Systems, SWACO, the City of Columbus, and Ohio State, right here in this room to review the context, emerging strategies, and market opportunities for the circular economy of Central Ohio's plastic streams. This interactive program will review specifically which plastic products in the Central Ohio region can be utilized effectively in reuse or recycled forms, or eliminated from the supply chains altogether. That program will serve as a great and local follow-on to today's conversation with themes that are transferable across regions. On November 14th, we'll be unveiling a new approach to waste management for our EPN Breakfast, which we believe will further cut back on the waste generated from our system today. If you're interested in event management, implementing zero waste, and composting friendly strategies, then please sign up for our new November event today. We'll end our 2023 autumn series on the evening of December 5th with a statewide celebration of the Eastern Hemlock Tree. Outdoor enthusiasts touring Ohio's Appalachian parks and natural areas, such as the Mohican and Clifton Gorge, will recognize this evergreen tucked into the ravines and towering among Ohio's cliffs and rocky outcroppings at nearly 70 feet in height. Stands of this tree can host nearly 100 unique bird species in Ohio's forests, and the riparian canopies nurse healthy stream habitats by offering cool temperatures and moist soils, harboring ecologically rich communities of native salamanders, fish, and freshwater invertebrates. While hemlocks are an indicator of ecological health and nature-based recreation and tourism in Ohio, they're under threat from invasive species and ecosystem loss. Join us here in December to learn from 4 charismatic leaders of the multi-pronged effort to conserve one of Appalachia's signature species. Registration for both our November and December programs are open now, and like all of our EPN Breakfast events, these events will be live streamed for free via the EPN YouTube channel. We encourage you to become an EPN member today through a free and easy process at epn.osu.edu. Once an EPN member, you can post events, job openings, and receive announcements about forthcoming breakfast programs. Within the last month, the individuals listed on the screen joined the EPN. If you haven't done so already, add your name to our list of over 2,200 EPN members to further connect and grow and inspire with fellow environmental professionals and enthusiasts in the months ahead. For those who are sticking around for the workshop session, please plan to be back in the room by 9:45 a.m. This session will address some policy opportunities, regional collaboration potential, and together through a species of guided conversations and dialogues lead to the production of a who's who's guide to the community of sustainability professionals advancing circularity in the fashion and textile industries in Central Ohio. Joe will be stepping up here in about 10 minutes to provide further instructions and to introduce that session. We have EPN team members who will be resetting this room for the workshop mode. Food and beverage will continue to be served in the hallway until 11:45 this morning. While you're making your way out the door or clearing off your table, please pay close attention to the zero waste signs and instructions posted above the waste receptacles. Again, our next session will begin in about 10 minutes right here in this room. Thank you for participating today and have a nice rest of your morning.